Like
So
my dad says, they didn't break the mold when they made you, Dave.
yes. So Dave's mold breaking question is what? Can you rephrase it?
Kind of like, what are the must know things? What are the foundational things that a beginner to an intermediate guitar player just has to have under their belt to
Yeah.
be a solid player?
That's such a great question, and there are countless method books, and you can go to school and you can major in curriculum writing, and the best, most honest answer I can give you is that nobody really knows. It comes down to, and that's why we do all these things with goals, because there's so much to do on guitar that there are certain things that, if you were to pick up the Hal Leonard method book one, the very first thing they're going to have you do is, learning how to read quarter notes and half notes and eighth notes. And with most of our students, if we started there, you would have quit by now because it's boring. You're here to play the kind of music that you hear and you enjoy. So there is no linear path for guitar. And part of the reason is, well, let me put it this way. When you think about violin, what music comes to mind?
Orchestra music,
Absolutely. If you were to think about a trumpet, what kind of music comes to mind?
marching bands,
Yep, exactly. And if you think about saxophone, what kind of music comes to mind?
sort of both. I guess that can live in both worlds,
Or jazz, perhaps?
Yes, I
Yeah.
played saxophone. That was my instrument.
Yeah, see, exactly. And when you think about guitar, what comes to mind?
Rock and roll.
Yep, exactly. So, what kind of skill sets does it take to play each one of those? Well, if you want to be if you're going to play in band orchestra, you got to be able to sight read. You got to be able to read off of the page. So, the skill set to survive in that environment, even as a beginner, means you got to know your
Need music.
clefs. You got to be able to know your key signatures. You have to be able to understand rhythmic notation. All of that comes first because the expectation is you're going to play off the page. Don't you dare be creative with it because you're going to mess up the entire group.
Structure.
Yes, it's hyper structured. So people that come from the classical world into kind of the quarter bend teaching philosophy kind of get upended a little bit, and you realize that they're just making it up too. Honestly, I've looked at so many different method books for band and orchestra and trying to find the best route for teaching, and there really isn't one. Which again, time and time again, while we keep coming back to this goal setting stuff with guitar, the stuff that you like, Tom Petty doesn't read music. You think Tom Petty gets out a staff paper and a pencil and is drawing quarter notes and eighth notes on his staff? No, he grabs his guitar and he jams, he plays some chords together, and if he likes it, he adds some rhythm to it, and that's what he does. So learning how to read music to then learn rock and roll is like learning French so that you can learn Spanish so that you can translate it back into English. Makes no sense. You're taking all these extra steps just to take it right. I mean, the guy doesn't read and write music. Why do you?
The end result's the same.
Correct. It's just you wind up going this very boring, very dry academic route. I mean, if you can get through the first three books of Hal Leonard are like torture. I used to teach out of these things.
That's what Andrew, my son, took guitar lessons when he was a teenager, and Hal Leonard books still got him.
Yeah, and the Mel Bay is no better. The
And
Alfred series,
Mel
the Alfred
Bay.
series is no better either. Like, and everyone puts out these method books, but they work in this very linear fashion, and that's the only way that a method book can work is linear.
Yeah.
So you as the student, you assume that, okay, there's a clear path, that there must be a way to get from beginner to intermediate, and there must be this path, but there's not.
Steps along the way, which is sort of my question. Maybe that's not a good question.
No, it's a great question. It's a great question, but what it comes down to is like what's important to you, which is why I have you guys sitting down and thinking, what do I really want to do on the guitar? Because what my job is to actually put limits on you guys and say, look, you can't do it all. Like, just like when you're talking to your children, you can't be a firefighter and an astronaut and a policeman and a doctor. You're going to have to pick a path. It's all really cool. Yeah, I know, but there's not enough time. You can't do it all. You won't. A guitar is the same thing. So what we do is we have to really just kind of limit you and say, Dave, what do you really want to do? What's the most important thing? And then you have to be consistent. Consistency is what you need. If I were to tell you honestly, the things that the beginners have to work on is the same thing that everybody has to work on, and it's the three things that we cover in fundamentals. Make sure that you're always working on something with chords. You should always be extending your harmonic vocabulary, understanding chords. In the beginning, it's just memorize the darn things, know what they're supposed to look like, know what they're supposed to sound like, and then make sure from there, when you have chords, the next step is to make sure that you can do them quickly. It's one thing to be able to see them and to be able to draw out a chord chart and recognize a chord chart. It's another thing to be able to get to a D chord at 100 beats per minute when you need to from a
Yeah,
G chord. And if you
right.
don't ever work on the speed between there, it never gets any better. So I say this pretty often, like speed before clarity when it comes to chords, right? It's just like we're learning how to throw darts. I think I used this analogy in training yesterday. When you're learning chords, it's like I'm teaching a big, absolute beginner dart thrower. Your job is to just hit the board. You know, stop trying to hit the bullseye every single time. Like you're not even hitting the board. Get the darts in the wall first, right? That's what I say with the speed thing with chords is you got to be able to just move your hand, all of your fingers at once to hit the board before we start bullseyeing stuff with all four fingers. It ain't going to happen. So stop trying. Not with chords. Okay. So you should always be working on something with chords. In the beginning, it's just identifying and being able to read chord charts and memorizing 8 to 10 open chords: E major, E minor, D major, D minor, A major, A minor, C. The last two chords are F and B minor, F major and B minor, because you see they suck.
Yeah.
Okay. From there, it's starting to understand then the components of chords. Why do they come together in this order? It's once you can physically do it, once you can physically play chords for a while, you're going to feel like, oh, I've come as far as I can with chords, which isn't true. But for a good bit in the middle of intermediate, you should be understanding everything that you can about your chords. What's the difference between a major chord and a minor chord? What makes this an F chord versus that an F chord? Why would I use that F chord instead of this one? Understanding when you're playing like a G chord, where is the G, where is the B, where is the D? You need that stuff because in my mind, most of the intermediate stuff is just about expanding what you already know. It's adding in seventh chords would be the next step for like an intermediate student. Okay, so we're going to learn some seventh chords. We're going to learn how to add on. If you just memorize the seventh shape, like adding the seventh into every chord, you're going to get just a ton of more chords that you now have to memorize, because now you have to learn. There's two of each type essentially. There's a major and there's a dominant. Both. So if I take a C major chord, I can make it a C major 7, or I can make it a C dominant 7. Holy crap, that's twice the information to memorize just off of a C chord. If I learn the minor 7, there's a minor 7 flat 5, which is a goofy sounding chord. Holy crap, now there's twice for every chord that I used to know. Now I have to memorize 2 more.
Yeah.
If you don't get to the understanding level, you're always just going to be memorizing stuff. So if you start to look at, oh, okay, here's the G, the B, and the D, I know that if I want to make the 7th, all I have to do is swap out one of the G's for the note that's a half step below, and I'm done. I don't
So
have
you
to.
have to know the theory in order to apply.
Correct. And that's why I teach music theory, because it's a shortcut to memorizing. And it's not really even a shortcut. It's an intellectual understanding so that you can chunk larger pieces of information and not bog your memory down with all these different chord shapes. It's processes. It's processes, right? So that's the difference between, early intermediate and late intermediate. It's being able to play a triad, or it's being able to play a 7th chord and saying, okay, my 3rd is here, my 7th is there, my root is here, my 5th is there. When it comes to harmony at the advanced level, it's what happens if I play a G major triad and a C minor triad at the same time, and learning how to do that. And that's where you get all those weird jazz chords like the flat 13s and all this other stuff. And it's starting to interweave 2 chords at the same time and understanding complex harmony. And you're never done with that, right? And you're always going back and you're revisiting, the intermediate and the advanced stages is going back and revisiting how many different ways can I play C, E, and G. There's all kinds of different ways that I can. All sorts of ways that I can invent. I'm just, I never played that particular form of C major before this very moment. So I can go back through and figure it out. So that's the advanced stuff, right? And then there's 2 other categories. There's your rhythmic stuff and there's your melodic stuff. So what do you got to know? What is the bare bones stuff that someone's got to know? You should always be working on your chord vocabulary. You should always be working on your scale vocabulary. You should always be working on your rhythmic vocabulary. As your teacher, that is your meat. That's your carbs, your fat, and your protein.
They're the base building blocks.
That's exactly right. And from there on, it's basically all the other stuff is dependent on your particular goals. It's a diet. So like some people want to learn songs, some people want to gobble up songs. So it's great. So what we're going to do then is we're going to start to apply those things through song. Some people want to write their own songs. So great. So you're going to write songs that combine these elements. What everyone should be doing then with the remaining skills is making them musical. So having some element of musicality that we're working on. So it's not being able to just play an E minor and a G chord doesn't do anything if it's not musical. So adding in things like palm muting, dynamics, that stuff, arpeggiating, all that stuff is teaching you guys how to add the musicianship to it, not just play a chord, because my computer can do that. I can plug in an E minor chord right now into my computer software, it'll play it back. If that's all you're ever doing, there's no need for humans to ever play instruments ever again. It's adding in all that personal choice. If I'm going to palm mute this note and I'm going to play this one, I'm going to accent that, and I'm going to slide into this.
That's musicality.
That's musicality.
All right. Because that term, I hear that term, and I sometimes wonder, well, what does that really mean?
Yep.
And that gives me a sense of it.
So it's notes versus music. So when I say musicality, here are notes. Here's musicality.
Ornamentation.
Yeah, it's all that. It's all that. It's all that. It's the difference between, a sketch and a final product. If you're an artist, there's the sketch, which is just the note. There's line drawings. There's a stick figure, and then there's the finished production.
All colored in.
Yeah.
Good.
And
well,
then
that helps me understand it a little better. Yeah.
And then the fifth thing is integration. You should always be integrating these things.
Is that where you're trying to get us to combine the skills?
Yes.
From one month to the next into a combined skill?
That's exactly right.
I got it. I think I understand that there's no one path for everyone.
Yeah. I mean,
so I got to make my path, but I've got to make it using these things that we just talked about.
Correct. That's exactly right. And that's why I talk about goal setting and where you guys at and what skills are you working on. All that. That's why there's so much of that in training is like, you got to be consistent. And honestly, Dave, it doesn't really matter what skills you choose. And I'm saying this with caution, and there's a giant asterisk there.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. It's the fact that you're doing something.
Yes, you must be consistent, and it has to be fun, or at least you have to know that it's a stepping stone to fun. You know what I mean? If you hate it and you don't know why you're doing it and you only practice it once a month, it shouldn't be on your. Well,
you won't do it.
There's no point. It's just occupying a space where something else could be.
You might do it for a while, but it's going to get harder and harder.
Yes. So if you don't understand why it's on your plate, if it's not immediately fun or a stepping stone to fun, we got to figure out, either I haven't explained to you why it's on here well enough, or it shouldn't have been on there in the first place.
Yeah, I just don't want. I think sometimes I get confused between what I think I should be doing and what I want to do.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't have to make that choice, is what I hear you saying.
Correct.
What do you want to do? And then here's what you need to do to get there.
Yes. And here's the part where people struggle, is they don't really think about the long-term want. We are very much immediate gratification people. I mean, as much as we think adulthood trains us for delayed gratification, I think that's a lot of nonsense. I mean, we still want what we want, and we want it now, right? So if you only do the things that you want to do, then you lose the consistency element. So you can do what you want to do at the beginning of the month, but know that you're stuck with those 5 skills for the rest of the month. And that's why I do that for a reason. It's like, okay, you can do whatever you want, but no, what you pick today, you're going to do every day. You have to, because otherwise there's no point of even doing anything. If your goal is to just occupy your time by holding a piece of wood with some strings on it, fine, then that's great. But if you want to improve, you got to do the same stuff every day.
Yeah.
So when you pick something, don't just pick something that was interesting in this very moment. Pick something that you've been consistently interested in, which is why we go through this ultimate vision. Why do you want this? This is to get you thinking about, what am I consistently interested in? What am I going to be willing to work towards for the next, 30 days?
sometimes it's hard to know that, I think, too, but because I don't think too many people have sat down and really thought that through to its ultimate conclusion. But
I agree. Oh, I agree. And
it's
again,
important
that's
to do it.
by going through the process, though, you're subconsciously doing it. Even if you're not sure that you're doing it, I just made you think about where you want to be as a guitar player for the last 10 minutes. Or, when we go through this in training,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
made you think about the long term for the last 10 to 15 minutes.
We're almost
All the,
doing it right now.
yeah. you know so even if you don't think you're sure in that moment, after I've prepped your brain to think this way about what does Dave want, I've prepped you to think long term, so any answer that you give after that is going to be a better answer than if we
Than
just
if
go
I
into a
hadn't
cold.
done it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's been very, very helpful to go through these 3 or 4 things, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I think they're great questions, and I thought this was a good question, which is why I hit the record button on this so that I
Oh
could.
no, this is recorded
Oh, absolutely.
for perpetuity.
Yep.
It's on my permanent record.
It is. It is.
Oh no.
So, do you have any messages for students that may be watching
No,
this in
no
the future?
messages.
Okay, no,
No,
no messages
just
from the
no.
past.
God didn't break the mold. That's the one. Words of wisdom from Dave.